began 200 million years ago. Now, can you just imagine that? But this Earth is 4,500 million years old. And on a timescale like that, 200 million is just like yesterday. But for the first 1,000 million years, the Earth was dead. There was absolutely nothing. And then... It took 3,000 million years for the earliest form of life, bacteria, to develop into bony fish. Life may have been a slow starter, but once it got going, it was full steam ahead. Some of those fish must have realized they were destined for higher things, because over the next 100 million years, their fins turned into legs, and little fellas like these crawled out of the water onto land. And their descendants rule the world in the age of the dinosaurs. And for 140 million years, nobody argued with these fellows about who was boss. But when did we get a look in? Well, if the dinosaurs belong to yesterday, we humans, well, we've popped up in the last 5 minutes, sometime between 2 and 4 million years ago. But it does prove two things. Firstly, that man and dinosaur never lived together, no matter what the movies say. And secondly, by heck, we aren't half new at this evolution game. Well, has the world itself changed along with its inhabitants? Perhaps the dinosaurs would lose their way in the 20th century. And how would they cope with the London traffic? Barry, this is London, 1983. Millions and millions of years ago, when the Earth was beginning to form, where were the continents?
Well, in those days, when the first dinosaurs evolved, which is the period of time we call the Triassic, a bit over 200 million years ago, there'd just have been one enormous continent, which would have stretched from way up beyond the North Pole down to beyond the South Pole. So the little early dinosaurs could have walked with dry paws from Australia all the way up through North America and right through Asia to China.
What period did the continents start splitting?
Well, very soon after that, in fact, the ocean started to encroach on the dry land.
Yeah.
So that started to divide the dry land up.
What about living fossils?
Well, I suppose one thing to say is that most of the things that were alive in the days of the dinosaurs are still with us. It's the dinosaurs themselves. Those did all go out with a bang, more or less at the same time. But things like crocodiles and turtles and tortoises and lizards and snakes, they are still alive today, are comparatively unchanged. And of course there were sharks living in those days. Talking about living fossils, I suppose the best example is the coelacanth, which of course was found in 1939. People like myself had been saying wisely for a long time. Well, of course, they've been extinct for 70 million years, and suddenly somebody catches one off the coast of Madagascar.
Is it possible that somewhere on this planet there is some sort of dinosaur from prehistoric times hidden away in a...
I'd love to believe in
So would
fairies
I.
and Father Christmas and the rest of it, but I'm afraid I can't really believe that. I think there are several things that suggest very strongly to me that it couldn't be so. One of them is, after all, they're not little things. Most of the dinosaurs were enormous, galumphing creatures, and mankind now being spread so thickly around the planet, I think the idea that we wouldn't have known of things of this size for a long time, I find that very surprising. We've got rocks over the last 65 million years in which we've got lots of bones of the mammals that have evolved and diversified in that time. We haven't got a single bone of a single dinosaur through all those rocks. Surely that means they've been extinct throughout that period of time.
They look like pterodactyls. But they can't be. They've been extinct for millions of years.
If I am not mistaken, that is a diplodocus.
A diplodocus?
The world in which dinosaurs still live could only be a land that time forgot, because although scientists like Barry Cox are certain that dinosaurs became extinct 64 million years ago, some people insist on believing that somehow, somewhere, some of these dinosaurs might have survived. Now, there have been many dinosaur sightings over the years, and most of these have proved to have been hoaxes. But one or two have remained a mystery, and this is what people love. They love to believe that a strange creature was still roaming around in some unexplored distant land, and it's a popular theory. I mean, just have a look at the film titles. The Lost World, Journey to the Center of the Earth, 1 million years BC, and Mysterious Island. Than that have emerged from the seas, and that's where the dinosaurs' ancestors came from. Now, this thing is the type of reptile from which the dinosaurs developed, and it lived just like a crocodile, on land and in the water. And Beverley explained how they adapted to both elements.
If you're a flesh eater in water, the you've got to drive yourself through the water, and a very powerful muscular tail is important. The other thing is, if you think of ordinary reptiles, they move their legs like this. Now, if you want an enormous thrust to drive you through the water, to sort of charge after your food, then you need to use the whole of your legs like that, a great big sort of movement like that, really powerful. And it is that sort of getting your legs sort of straight in, that's the key to the dinosaurs.
Now, they came out of the water with these huge, powerful legs. How did they move?
Well, there's a problem there because their back legs are much longer than their front legs, and so their back legs could run faster than their front legs.
It almost...
That's very...
somersault.
It's a problem, it's a problem. And the way they overcame that was simply to just get up on their back legs, use their back legs alone, because they were the fastest. And their heavy muscular tail would have acted as a balance to the rest of their body. So
I see, yes.
Suddenly you had flesh-eating, two-legged animals running all over the shop.
And then some really developed huge, though, didn't they?
Not for quite a long time. Initially, they were all fairly small, but all meat-eaters.
The dinosaurs were eventually persuaded to eat up your greens, and most of them became vegetarians. But that didn't necessarily mean a boring diet. Beverley and I reviewed the choices available on their menus.
When the plant eaters emerged and developed, was this the sort of stuff that they would have for breakfast, lunch and dinner?
Yes, in fact, what we're looking at here are cycads. These are living fossils. In fact, the whole of plant life at the time of the early part of the age of dinosaurs was of these plants, these cycads. They look rather like palms, but they're not palms, they're very primitive.
They're actually very tough as well, aren't they?
They're very tough and very sharp, and dinosaurs were able to cope with this sort of food.
Now, underneath, on the ground, were the grasses there?
No, grasses had not evolved at that stage. What you had were ferns and mosses and things like that. And again, the dinosaurs would have fed on those.
What about the trees? Had they developed?
Yes, you had conifers, maidenhair trees, the ginkgo, but it was these particular plants, these cycads, which were the dominant plant life of the time.
Did they have flowers in prehistoric times?
No, not at the beginning of the age of dinosaurs. It wasn't until really the middle, about 100 million years ago, that we have the first evidence of true flowering plants, and that's magnolia. In fact, magnolia is another living fossil that represents the basic stock of all our familiar modern-day plants that began in the middle of the age of dinosaurs, like oak trees, sycamore, birch, hazel, holly, and a lot of the common flower, roses, for example, they're all around at the time of the age of dinosaurs. So if you'd actually were dumped down in the sort of middle of the age of dinosaurs, well, towards the end, and you'd see all the familiar plants, you'd feel you were just in a modern environment.
So if a dinosaur came into Kew Gardens, into this house here, this sort of greenhouse, he'd think, I'm home.
He would, exactly. He'd be at home.
We've got several strong leads on the lifestyles of dinosaurs now, but we have to face the facts. There will always be questions that no one can answer. For instance, what kinds of sounds did they make? Did they roar, bellow, grunt, squeak, or even like this fella, did they whistle? And some of the dinosaurs had huge great crests on top of their heads. Did they act as amplifiers? If so, what sounds did they amplify? Another problem is finding out how fast they grew. How long did it take a baby brontosaur to grow to a fully grown 30-ton adult? How long's a piece of string? How long did dinosaurs live? They might have still been young'uns at 70, or a bit like me in their prime at 120. Some modern reptiles hibernate and sleep through the chilly winter months. Maybe this fella did the same. Or did he just sleep through the summer to avoid the dry season, like the crocodiles? What colours were they? We can't prove it, but on this we can hazard a guess. Take the plant eaters. They would have lived in the woods and the forest, so they needed camouflage. Greens, browns, yellows and blacks. Then you've got the meat eaters. Maybe they stalked their prey and then pounced on them like the big cats of today. So could they have had gold stripes and black stripes? And then you've got the giant dinosaurs, a brachiosaurus, maybe like our elephants, who are the big boys of today. Maybe in a fetching shade of battleship grey. There will never be answers to these questions, so for the very first time, the dinosaur trail has run into a dead end. Tyrannosaurus was a hefty beast, but not all dinosaurs were as big as he was. So how did the others measure up? I set out with Beverley to find out how many you got to the pound, and we began by weighing up the big lads of today, the elephants.
He's rather small. You need about 5 of those to get into a sort of average, your average dinosaur, like an iguanodon.
Were they all big?
No, there were some very tiny ones, like Compsognathus was about the size of a chicken, and there's the Argentinian mouse dinosaur, Mussaurus, about this sort of size, really tiny jobs.
And then you got the huge ones, I mean...
Yes, I mean, if you think of, say, your average typical dinosaur one thinks of is about the equivalent of 5 of these, but something like Brontosaurus, about 12 or 15 of these. That's, just thinking of just meat, the actual sort of meat of animal.
Yeah.
And Supersaurus, Brachiosaurus, was the equivalent of about 40 of these. Imagine 40 of these all stacked in one single skin.
Now, these mammals are all warm-blooded. The prehistoric ones were cold.
Well, yes. Now, the thing about being warm-blooded, like we are, is that our internal machinery runs at the same pace, and it's a pretty fast pace. We have quite a high internal temperature. And to do that, as the elephants have to do it, you've got to eat and eat and eat. You've got to continually fuel your internal machinery.
So if you're cold-blooded, you don't have to eat so much then?
No, you need to eat about a tenth. If one of these was a dinosaur, it would need to eat, instead of, 12 hours a day, sort of a couple of hours, or even 1 hour a day. They always had one problem, that is getting overheated. And so you can either lengthen one bit out like the neck or a tail, or have, like in Spinosaurus and Uranosaurus, a great bony sail running up their back. And Stegosaurus had these plates, and these were, like little radiators, extra cooling devices.
Another milestone on the dinosaur trail, and already the popular idea that all dinosaurs were enormous has bitten the dust. And if by some miracle they came back today, I reckon they'd have to ask the scouts to help find their way around in a very unfamiliar world. So next week we're going to follow in their footsteps and set out on safari into the depths of dinosaur country. So see you then. Bye-bye. Mr. Holmes, what are those? Oh, elementary, my dear Noakes. They're footprints. They went that way. They're size 7. I don't know how he does it.